Hello, believe it or not, this picture is a distinguished health physicist in one of his earlier years. Dale Denham is a health physicist that has contributed an incredible amount to the Health Physics Society. And by the way, as chairman of the History Committee, it's my pleasure to be interviewing Dale today. This is Monday, the 18th of February, 2002. And we're at the annual meeting of the Physics Society, and we're going to spend a while talking about Dale's career in health physics and his earlier years. And Dale, maybe a good place to, you were born where?
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Right. And you went to college?
At Willamette University, Salem, Oregon.
And this is you at the tender age of?
22, I guess, when 22? I graduated from college.
And what was your major?
Mathematics and physics. A Bachelor of Arts. Willamette is a small liberal arts college, the oldest university in the West, 1842. So
quite old.
Delightful, you know, on a student body of about 1,200. It's probably more like about 1,500 today, but it's still a nice, small, concentrated, but of course not an engineering school. It's a liberal arts. So of course we took courses in Bible and you know, the arts and music, as well as our science and math. We only had one math and one physics prof, so you know you had to schedule your courses so that you could get through that spectrum, because they couldn't teach all the courses every year. It's a little different today, but my initial intent, Sid, had been to go to a 3-2 plan, so I'd get 2 bachelors, a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science, and I'd go to Stanford. That's what I had in mind, electrical engineering. Never got there. Got too enthused about staying in Willamette, and then I heard about the Health Physics Fellowship Program when I was a junior, and that brought me to today, to a career that I would have never believed at that time.
So when was it that you entered the Health Physics Program?
Well, I entered that just as I graduated in the fall of 1960. I spent 2 years at the University of Washington and a summer at Hanford. This particular shot here is when I was there. There were 8 of us in the class. We had one public health service fellow who was really in the dental side of the coin. The rest of us were all health physics major. We were in the first graduating class at the University of Washington with a master's in radiological science.
And that's you in the striped shirt there?
That's me in the striped shirt. You can't guess it with with the whiskers and of course crew cuts were pretty common at that time.
And so you got what, a master's in radiological health?
Radiological science, yeah.
Radiological science. Yeah. And who was your most influential professor, teacher there?
Well, Dr. Albert Bath. He was the nuclear engineering professor and also the one who really brought a reactor, a small reactor there to the University of Washington. Everything was basically brand new at the time. But I suppose the other influence was a graduate student by the name of Bill Wilson and Ralph Balso. Ralph was then basically working as the RSO at the university at the time.
And were you married at that point?
I got married that summer, yes.
And you were 23,
I guess. Yeah.
23. And did you know you were going to have a job at Hanford at that point?
Well, yes, because we knew that the program was, the fellowship program only was offered at a half a dozen schools. I guess in later years there were more schools involved, but the only 2 schools I actually applied to were Kansas and University of Washington. I wanted to stay in the West. I was from the Northwest, didn't know anything about the East, as I came to know later through coming to know you, Sid. But my basic plan was to try and stay in the area. And of course, I had visited Hanford. I had started visiting there in the late 40s. Dad was in the radio business and had the opportunity to go up to Richland and start up a radio station in Tri-Cities.
Oh, well, when did you do that?
Dad chose not to do that, but his best buddy did. And since we were 2 families that we spent Easter and 4th of July were the holidays that these 2 daughters, and I had a sister. So the two families did a lot of things together, and so once they moved up there to try and start the station, which they did, actually started in '47, and they stayed there for 10 years. Very successful, sold out the station. Station still exists today, not under the same call letters. And I actually contributed photographs before for their 50th anniversary. They just celebrated a few years back. Wow. They were delighted for me to bring in some old pictures when they were building the transmitter and so on. That was what. So I was aware of Hanford, but you know, we spent time at their home. They lived in Kennewick, and we played as kids. You know, so who would believe, you know, that.
Right. And so back in what, '64 was it? You were back again working?
No, actually, I finished my master's and went to the University of California. Went to Livermore, North Livermore Lab.
Oh, you went to LRL.
Yeah, LRL to begin with.
Now you've always been closely associated with the church.
Yes, that's true.
Where does this fit chronologically in the South?
Well, chronologically, when I met my wife, she was actually met her at a boarding house there in Seattle, but she was a chemist. She had graduated and she was working at the hospital, and I ended up getting my master's program doing neutron activation analysis on rheumatoid arthritic patients. I did the very first step in that, just trying to prove the neutron activation analysis using the university reactor. And my thesis advisor was in the Department of rheumatoid arthritis, were the folks that he worked with most.
What were you looking for?
Looking for gold, because gold, they used a gold salt that didn't stop or cure the disease, but it made it more palatable for the folks. So I had 2 outpatients that I collected all their urine and was looking for a mechanism. Spent quite a bit of time. I used little plastic vials that would pipette the urine into, activate, look for the gold. No problem finding the gold. The problem was to distinguish the amount of gold from the sodium and all the other stuff that was there in huge quantities. And as you know, sodium's got a short half-life, but it's got 2.75 MeV gammas coming off, so it was difficult. We tried all sorts of things like cadmium. We scrambled the reactor a number of times. We tried looking at shorter radiation times, longer radiation times, and we didn't have a multi-channel analyzer. So I was using a single-channel analyzer. So you can.
Oh, that's the hard part.
Yeah, that was the hard part. So that was an interesting experiment. But a fellow, further fellowship students got to follow on, and because the whole idea was to set up the technique or mechanism to do activation analysis on basically human tissues, samples, because urine was the quick and easy thing to get lots of samples, but not necessarily the best indicator. And of course, gold, like other toxic metals, was toxic, and you wanted to get that level within the patient that wasn't causing the patient harm, but relieving the problems for the patient.
So what did you end up doing? Class separation first and then activation analysis?
No separation. No, I was looking for a quick and dirty, so to speak, way, and I ended up with a combination of time and decay time. Irradiation time. I went through short and long irradiation times and all this sort of thing. But not having a multi-channel analyzer, we finally got one just as I was about to finish the project. So actually I got to plot a few to see the picture, but really it turned out there was some chlorine and some other things in there that I had totally missed. That spectrum stripping that came along, of course now today, with computers and all, but at the time we had to use that. No, I finished that program and was, my wife was born and raised in Long Beach, California. So the idea of going to California, I got an interview trip, and I had relatives in the Bay Area and over on the west side in Palo Alto, Stanford area. So that was palatable, and I had a delightful interview trip, so I accepted the position.
Now, were you working with Wade Patterson then?
No, I wasn't with Wade at that point. Yes, but I certainly spent time with Wade. Our department manager at the time was Harry Keller. Harry had been involved in a lot of the weapons testing activities, and John Valanda was our radiation safety section head. If you don't mind me digressing for a quick second, I put together a little history, and one of the first things that came out, I joined there in the fall of 1962.
You joined what? The Health Physics Society?
Yeah, I joined the society that fall. Actually, I guess I officially became a member the first of 1963, so haven't quite got the 40 years in yet. But he announced that the radiation safety support for programmatic teams is now complete, a full complement of health physicists. The benefits, though, won't be apparent for a few more months, since I was the only one who had a clearance. And Ron Catherine came in to join, became my office mate. And of course, we've had a wonderful history for all these many years, including me introducing him to his wife. But we became office mates and got really well acquainted through that activity. And of course, because I had the Q clearance, I was assigned to the Q cleared areas. So I was assigned to the chemistry department, which was handling weapons, debris, in other words, analyzing material coming back from test site, because at that time, I think we were already under the test ban treaty, so there were no tests going on out in the city. They had all been
that was 58, 59.
Right, that's right, that time period. And so I got assigned there. I also got assigned to train ceramic facility. And these were newbies to me. I wasn't familiar with this material.
Yeah, you weren't a chemist, you were a physicist.
That's right, that's right. But I got heavily involved in really getting acquainted with the train ceramics. And hadn't been there but 6 months, and we had our first criticality accident. Occurred about midnight. And
at Los Al
at Livermore.
At Livermore.
Yeah, it was a shielded vault. You know, it was a uranium experiment, enriched uranium, and it was a donut arrangement where there'd been a stick, and then parts fell together, and no one was exposed, you know, because it was a total shielded facility. But that certainly gave us around the clock for a number of days good practical health physics dealing with. No, not to speak of. I mean, we made some theoretical calculations and so on, but we could not find anything.
Was there a stack monitor there?
Not a stack monitor as such, but we had remote detectors and so on in the facility. We used that kind of information, plus the number of fissions that we estimated, you know, and so on. So we put quite a study together, and actually that happened in March, and at the June meeting in New York, we presented a paper on that. You know, it was a last minute, but it was a timely topic. Others of interest, and it turned out that Harry Keller, our department manager, made the presentation. I was one of the co-authors with Ron Catherine and Jack Brown.
So this is one of your earliest health physics publications.
Yes, it was my very first one. Very exciting, and of course I hadn't even been there quite a year yet when I got to go to the annual meeting. I had never been to New York, but it gave me some practical, you know, what to do. I didn't know that later I'd get involved in civil defense, and eventually in my career get into emergency preparedness and so on. So it was a good foundation. Matter of fact, I believe that I couldn't have had a better training ground than the lab. We had so many opportunities, and the way we operated, you know, we operated as a health and safety team. We were actually called health and safety engineers. And so we worked with industrial hygiene, fire protection, you know, general safety, high explosive safety, depending upon, you know, what you were involved with. So that made a delightful opportunity for us.
How many years were you at the lab?
Well, I stayed there not quite 5, and then I went back to Hanford. Joined Hanford in April of '67. Joined actually Patel. Went to work in criticality safety there.
You see, I guess in April of '67, well, her partner was still there.
Yes, you bet. You bet. Yes, and of course
So
I.
when did you meet her? Was that?
Well, I didn't meet her right off the bat. You know, I saw his picture around because he had been the lab director and so on. I was more involved in what you and I would think of in the classic health physics sense. That I was really in the health physics department. That's not what it was called.
Operational health physics.
Yeah, yeah. And I was really in the nuclear safety section, and criticality safety was my responsibility, and that was my real role there, was to develop the criticality safety manual.
And all those tank farms existed then, as I remember.
Oh, you
so
bet.
You really had some killer problems.
Yes, we had a site full, you know, but I had, and of course, Battelle did then and does today still have site-wide responsibilities for certain kinds of activities in the health physics arena. But this was an opportunity then to get acquainted with others. I moved from criticality safety. I had developed the criticality safety manual. We hadn't had one yet. And this was basically what kind of reviews you needed. We weren't doing the calculations. In other words, how much material you could store in different places. Those were done by others. Les Brown and Dwayne Clayton. They were at the critical mass facility, and they were involved there. But
was Carlos Newton there then?
yes, you bet. Carlos, I worked with Carlos.
Joe Soldak?
Yes. Lots of wonderful, well, and
Art Keene?
Yes, you bet. Art Keene was our department manager.
Was a head of health physics, as I remember.
Yes.
Yes. And superb health physicist.
Mm-hmm.
That is such an incredible staff of people that you had to work with.
Yeah. That's what I say, you know, you couldn't beat my Livermore experience and then coming to Hanford and being dropped in with a tremendous
Wally
staff.
Howell?
Wally Howell, you bet. As a matter of fact, I lived just about 3 houses from Wally Howell, so we got a lot of interaction.
I went sailing with Wally a number of times.
Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
And so, and let me see, who else was there? Bill Resch?
Yes.
Hawaii County?
Bill Resch actually taught some of our grad school classes at the University of Washington in dosimetry.
He's a superb dosimeter.
Yes. Of course, he has since passed on.
But Addison Resch is, you know, one of the definitive 4-volume textbook on radiation dosimetry. Probably maybe the greatest one ever written. It's hard to say there's a greatest, but among the greatest, certainly. And to have him to be there and to work with him for years, what an experience that must have been, Dale.
Yes, it was. You know, because I was under the greats. Even later in my career, I got involved in the Hanford Environmental Dose Reconstruction Project. And of course, that brought me then the opportunity to go back to the beginners. Yeah, John Till, of course, was very much part of that. But we went back and brought in the folks who developed the programs, brought in people like Soldat, Jack Healy, and learned from them just how they put things together. This was even before the cow milk, the island, the cow milk pathway business was even understood.
Carlos Newton?
Carlos Newton.
I'm trying to remember the great health physicists that were there that were, you know, just breaking ground for our profession.
Yeah, well, I think of Soldat in the environmental monitoring arena, Jack Selby, Leo Faust, you know, a tremendous list of guys, many of whom now are retired. A number of Jim Saline, for example, who was involved with us in nuclear safety. He's passed on. You know, a number of them we've lost. But what a wonderful training ground. And of course, I've spent most of my career. I've got just short of 40 years, and 30 of those I've spent at Hanford. So there's been a wonderful collection of folks, and some, for example, a couple of my college buddies, Don Williams, who